Well, good afternoon, everybody. And once again, I am ready to have my world straightened out by Mr. Robert Fills. Fills? No, that's not right. Robert Mills. See, we get it wrong right from the beginning. So we'll try that one more time. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. This is Old Uncle Randy, and this is Things People Believe That Just Ain't So. And it's brought to you and investigated by Mr. Robert Mills, coming to you not high atop the mountain, but sitting in the valley out in California. And how are you doing today, Robert?
Terrific, Randy. Always a delight to be with you. Thank
Well,
you.
I know our listeners and our people are really engaged in hearing what you have to say because items today are very topical. It's hard to sort out what's true and what's not true. And I know you do a lot of work sorting out what are facts and fiction. So give me the highlights of where we're going today, Robert.
Well, we're going to discuss today this fascinating and perplexing issue of what is people are calling viewpoint diversity. And it sort of came out of nowhere in the last few years. And I'm going to trace some of the history of it. Um, but it's being imposed on universities. The Trump administration went to Harvard and said, we're going to pull all your grants that go to medicine research for tuberculosis and childhood diseases unless provide this viewpoint diversity in your faculty and your students and your discussion. Everything has to be viewpoint. What does it mean? Where did it come from? And how can that be achieved? And what does it really even mean? So we're going to discuss that today, give you some of my takes on it, and maybe you'll have it will pique your interest in it. And as you watch this unfold, you sit with your popcorn on watching TV and you hear about this, you'll have some more insights into it, hopefully, and help you understand it as this unfolds. Okay. So let's start with the beginning here, which is what DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. This is this name that came up from some years ago and has worked its way up into political culture. And it came from two sources. Number one is that it was an effort to prevent discrimination and to be sure that everybody had a fair chance. It wasn't meant to be a quota, which is how it's been perceived by a lot of people as a white male exclusion quota. But it wasn't meant that way. It was meant to give everybody an equal opportunity, okay? And then there were a whole bunch of studies that were done by these big, consulting companies that are very, very, like McKinsey and Boston Consulting. And they went out and did these studies of organizations that were, quote, diverse, okay? And they discovered that organizations that had ethnic and sexual diversity, men and women and people from different backgrounds and cultures and countries, they were enormously and measurably more successful and profitable than organizations that were monocultures, where everybody was a woman or everybody was a white man. And so, they didn't say why this was, which I would find fascinating. And I'm going to do some more research and see if I can't figure out what. No one talked about why. They only these studies were just designed to say, here are these companies that don't have diversity, and look at their proportional and per capita and per employee productivity and profit. And after they enacted these, what happened? And they showed that being ethnically diverse is good for business. It's good for profit. Okay. So that's generally not even controversial today. The business community largely believes that diversity is good for them, is good for business. Okay. And so we'll have to. I'm fascinated. I'm sure you are too, about why exactly is a diverse business more successful than a not diverse business. They don't go into that. We'll come back another time talking about that. But so recently, governments and organizations have sought to promote and foster and encourage diversity. And so that's where this DEI came from. And so what it's supposed to mean is not supposed to be a quota. That is, and so a lot of it's misinterpreted as a quota, and maybe In some instances, it might have been, but what it's supposed to stand for is the notion that everyone, white males, females, Black, Hispanic, Chinese, people with neurodivergent or handicapped or what, everybody has an equal opportunity to get into the company and to succeed in the company. Not an advantage, not a quota, just an equal shot at the pie. And that's what it's supposed to mean. And um, so that understood, uh, DEI is not a bad thing, uh, but to the extent that it is, and it's perceived by the conservatives as an anti-white male quota that's standing in their way, and it's just not supposed to be that, and it's not true, and so I submit that there's nothing wrong with DEI per se, okay? And unless it's misused or it's a cover somehow for reverse discrimination, that is to say, giving people from ethnic backgrounds and so forth an advantage over white males or other more qualified applicants, to the extent it does that, and it's not supposed to do that, that's not a good thing. With those things understood, okay, it's sad and perplexing to me to see this new administration, the Trump administration, so obsessed with DEI. I mean, Pete Hegseth comes in, I'm going to get rid of DEI, as if that's the big problem with the American military establishment. We have too much DEI. I mean, it's an issue like this big, and then the trans is the other issue, that they're just going crazy over these tiny, tiny issues. And the DEI, if it was done right, these studies show that empirically, you take a company that's diverse, it does better than a company that's not diverse. It makes more money for the shareholders. So why would that not be embraced? It has been embraced by almost universally by the business community. So what the Trump sadly and perplexingly has done is to point to DEI and use that as an excuse to go in and trash our, incredibly successful university, especially the Ivy League, to go in and take billions of dollars away from Harvard. And the interesting thing to keep in mind is that they're not taking it away from the faculty and the teaching. They're going out to the research, aspects of the university. Has these auxiliary organizations, the medical part, that does all this value, like we're talking about on tuberculosis, which was stopped by Trump, and on childhood diseases stopped. These were doctors doing research that would be valuable to you and me and our kids. They stopped it because of DEI. Yeah, because of DEI, of the interpretation of DEI, as if it's the root of all evil, and blocking all this. And this has been a huge issue for some time with conservatives, especially, and I think this is analogous. I'm going to bring all this back to viewpoint diversity in a minute, but the trans and gays, okay? And conservatives believe, and many of them do anyway, that children can be seduced or persuaded or indoctrinated to be gay, kind of like Catholicism. You can somehow, and the same thing is with trans, that it's somehow a choice, that people can be switched, and this underlies this discussion of DEI. I'll come back to it, but we now know, and people who spend 15 minutes on the internet, you can discover that being gay or being trans is a brain function. You're inherited. It develops in utero, in the brain. There is a part of your brain that develops, or your chromosomes that develop your sexual characteristics, your breasts and penises. And there's another section that develops your identity. Do you think of yourself as a man or a woman? And another, your preference, your orientation, they call it, whether you're gay or straight or in the middle or, bisexual. This is a brain function. It's a brain structure that you inherit, and you cannot change it. And there's these there's Christian groups that take these poor kids out and put them in these camps and, and indoctrinate them, for trying to get them back to being straight again. They get a lot of suicides, but you don't get any straight people because you can't change that. It's inherent. And really, it's kind of a sad thing. You have a kid, all these poor trans kids when they're 5, 6 years old, they say to the parents, Daddy, God made a mistake. I'm really a girl if there's a boy, or vice versa. And it's a sad thing to have a kid say that, and it is true that sometimes they've discovered this recently, without enough research and determination to looking into that, some of the people who were presenting themselves to trans were subjected to irreversible medical interventions that they later in life decide, no, I want to go back and reverse it. And so this is one of those things that needs more research. It needs doctors and scientists to sort this thing out. There's a lot of people out there, probably the great majority of trans people that had gender affirming surgery, gender affirming treatment, who say it saved my life. I was really a girl, now I can be a girl, and or vice versa. And so, this is something that needs to go on without the intervention of politicians to tell people or tell parents how to raise their kids. They need to do what's best for the kid with science. Okay. So out of this concept that being trans or gay can be somehow taught or indoctrinated or persuaded or seduced into people, this same false notion has worked its way over into the universities, okay? And the conservatives are acutely aware that most people with a college education are liberals. And the percentage of them that are liberals have been growing for a long time. There was a big study that was done that showed that in 2015, 44% of all the college graduates identified as liberal, and about 20-some% identified as conservative, and the others were kind of in the middle somewhere. And and it's gotten more since then. So the conservatives have taken that to mean that the universities teach liberal values, and therefore that the or non-Christian values, and so the solution to this is to go in and force them to change what they're doing. And the way it's come to pass is they're saying, and 10 states in the United States have passed laws requiring the university trustees and the university professors to, have, viewpoint diversity. And what is, they don't define that. It's a very interesting and fascinating concept to me as to what viewpoint diversity means. But I think it's a cover for them meaning conservative, traditional Christianity, all that kind of, and not something you could reach by intellectual means. So they want this viewpoint diversity, which is in a way undermines the whole basic notion of academic freedom. And also, it's interesting how it plays on the notion of free speech itself, the idea of the marketplace of ideas. But I understand the impulse that people, if they send their kid to a university, the taxpayers' dollars are paying for these state universities. They don't want them to be, quote, indoctrinating the students with this liberal notions, and they come out being taught liberalism. So what they've tried to do is they come in with these incredible new rules and they went to Harvard and they said, you must bring in new people, new faculty, new students, and they must be viewpoint diverse, meaning, of course, without saying so, that they be conservative, So what does that mean? I mean, it's an interesting concept, and in many ways it's antithetical to the idea of science and reasoning and reason and evidence and capital P philosophy, which is that truth is sought and achieved through reason and evidence. Okay.
Well, if I could just interject about the how deep that I heard, and you can sort it out for me, but basically what you're saying is that the administration said to Harvard, we want to sit and run your university. We want to,
Oh, they want to take it over, make it
yeah,
an affiliate of the Trump, you know, literally take it over and run it and decide who gets to make all the decisions, who's hired, the faculty, even who the students are. They're not even going to let them pick their own students. So it was so extreme and so ridiculous that Harvard sat down. They were working with some people from the administration over the anti-Semitism, some other things, and they said there's things we can do, and we have common ground on a few areas here. Let's work on that. And then they sent this letter to them, signed by 3 people in the administration, which they later denied was, and they said, so we want you to, and the university look at it, and everybody, there's just no way we could ever do this and Bill be Harvard. So, or even be, we just be an affiliate, and so they said, see in court, and their denial, that their defiance of it, really energized a lot of people. And then the law firms have also kind of gone back the other way. And I think a lot of these universities are realizing that, there was nothing in these proposals from Trump. They say, if you do this, we'll leave you alone. They'll be back for more.
right.
And there's no satiating them. And so the only way to do was to fight. So a couple of the big law firms, they did this to big law as well. It just said, we'll see you in court and we're going to fight you tooth and nail. And Harvard's decided it because they couldn't sign this. They just couldn't do it. Okay. And I mean, let's just talk about for a second what viewpoint diversity could be construed to mean. I mean, looking at this administration, okay, does it mean that vaccine denialists have to be on the medical faculty?
Yeah, there you go.
Does it mean that people who deny the 2020 election and believe in conspiracy theories that are so crackpot, they have to be, in the history faculty? Creationists have to be in the biology department who reject evolution?
Mm-hmm.
Quack nutritional theories and the health of, and people who be in the economics department who believe in the benefits of tariffs, the economic benefits of tariffs have to be somebody who agrees with that, And I just want to tell an aside story here, which I think most people, not, when this Utah senator named Smoot joined up with this widely regarded as crackpot guy named Hawley, and they put together this huge tariff package in Congress in 1930. And it imposed huge tariffs on Europe and the rest of the world. And it was so crazy then that, and this is part that's not known, needs to be known, that 1,028 leading economists and professors in the United States, across all Republicans, Democrats, everybody. And remember, the Republicans did this. It was Hoover was a Republican. And they all, 1,028 of them rushed to Congress across the board. This will not work. It is counterproductive. It will be a disaster. Don't pass it. On May the 9th, 1930, they passed it. Congress passed the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. And it contributed enormously to the Depression. And that resulted in the Republican Party being so thoroughly trashed by FDR. They didn't come back for 2 generations almost. And hopefully that's going to happen again. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Well, and again, if you go back to when did the Depression start?
It started really in about 30, 31, 32.
Oh, the same.
It got worse and worse over time. 32 was the bottom.
Yeah. And the, scenario right now, I mean, fast forward, I'll just give you a couple highlights in the last couple of days, but the ports are running about a third, ships coming in that normally come in, and the business being transported for weeks and months out doesn't look good. I mean, somebody had to sit and look around and say, hey, we're not getting anything. Nothing's coming our way, and it'll take, I've listened to 2 different people that have the understanding how long it would take to turn it around, that if somebody came out today and said, we're just going to end these tariffs, you're 2 months away from getting goods delivered back to our ports, loaded up, and the 2-week transition and getting the orders in and the money in and all that. So magically this week, 2 days ago, we had a calming of the water, so to speak, with China. I mean, yeah, let's just 90 days, cooling off period. Well, my opinion is just my opinion. It means nothing compared to Robert Mills, but I'll bet in the next 90 days, we don't hear much of anything about tariffs coming back. That whole thing will be covered over like peanut butter on a jelly sandwich, and tariffs will disappear and everybody will kiss and make up. But the funny thing that Trump said yesterday was it's really going to create a lot of great jobs and opportunity in China. I was like, wait a minute. Can I rewind what you just said? By ending these tariffs, it creates a lot of jobs and opportunity in China. Well, I thought the whole point of the tariffs to begin with was to create jobs and opportunity in America. Now we're going back to it's like a volleyball game. Yeah, and then the great massive deal with England. At least we're going to have 100,000 Rolls Royces brought into the country because they avoid. And I maybe have seen in my life 5 Rolls Royces. So I'm not exactly sure where those are waxed and polished and serviced. I'm sure there are a few around in the country, but 100,000 are now going to come in tariff free or very low tariffs. So get your Rolls Royce ordered there, Robert. It's all ready to go.
I've been longing for one, Well, my backyard, man, practically from my breakfast table, I look out in San Francisco Bay and I see these big ships, these container ships coming in.
Right.
And when they come in, they're low in the water. You can look on the little red line there, that, and then when they leave, they're sitting way high in the water. Okay. And as they go on, watch them go on the Golden Gate Bridge, because they're empty going out. This is our trade, writ large, right there. And
Yeah.
What I think happened, I mean, we exported jobs to China on purpose because the jobs we exported were polluting and dirty and low paying. And what we got in exchange, I don't hear anybody talking about this, is the intellectual property stuff. Our movies. We get $56 billion a year from foreign students coming to American universities. If you look at Google and all this stuff and the iPhones and all this the intellectual property that we sell to the world, we have the huge surplus in the low pollution, high return stuff, and we give China this dirty stuff that they can do. The idea that you can bring back that we're going to pay people to screw little screws in iPhones and pay them $5 an hour. I mean, you got to pay $20 an hour to give people work at 22 now, I guess it is at McDonald's. And there's all these studies that show that there's a threshold of wages. You go above that, and the robots do it. And that's what happened in Germany. The unions demanded these high jobs in Germany, and they agreed to pay them. Then it made it profitable for the companies to hire robots and build robots to do the workers' jobs.
Yeah.
And that's they're not going to come back here. We're on the threshold of this enormous change in the United States as robots take over, as the AI takes over. AI takes over, and those jobs were never going to come in the first place. But if they came here, they would be robot jobs. And the robots are going to take over most of it. And I don't know what people are going to do. I mean, I thought for a long time that, the idea of being a paralegal or something was not a job. But the intellectual, the AI stuff, you can go now and bring out your iPhone, and a computer will dictate a brief to you. This is as good as you can do yourself. Make the arguments, organize them, cite the cases, and you can say, I want cases within this state and this state and this and that. And it finds them and puts them right in the brief. So lawyers are about to get out. A lot of them, they are about to get their jobs taken away by robots. Can you imagine?
Well, I will tell you, I have friends in Hollywood. And I asked the question. I thought that the last strike was to have provisions in it, so that AI was not going to be introduced into movies and music and so forth and so on.
I saw that.
And that's the way I understood it. So I asked my good friend that you have met in the past, I said, how does this affect your producing music? And I mean, he went off. The reason I'm leaving his name off of this podcast, he went off like the volcano, potentially sitting in Mount Vesuvius of AI, not liking it. But I will tell you, things that came across my desk, I can sit and produce music in 90 seconds that phenomenal. I mean, totally phenomenal. Pick a topic. I gave it a topic, just a fun topic the other day of taking what would happen back in I Love Lucy time if ICE showed up at the Copa and arrested Ricky and then had to explain to Lucy where Ricky got sent back to Cuba, and I put that in just as a premise into an AI, chat GPT. And I said, give me some lyrics, for this song, this concept. And, let's just see what happens. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to pull this up for you. Just hold on just a minute, Robert, because what happened is that it chilled me that in 90 seconds, I could sit and produce a bit of music that to give people an example of what can happen with AI. And I'm going to find it here. Are you using AI, Robert, at all?
I use it a little bit. Most of what I do is not I have friends and colleagues and lawyer friends of mine who use it for everything. I mean, they they go on there and it makes arguments for them. It provides a creative output in postings, and I mean it's on the threshold of being able to really disrupt our society in all kinds of interesting ways that we haven't even begun to. But I think while you're doing that, I just mentioned that,
Sure.
tariffs is that what happened with this last day or so here is that China, which has a great threshold for pain, economic pain, and basically they told Trump, go fly a kite. We're not giving you nothing,
Right.
and he blinked because they called his bluff. He's
Right.
got nothing. You saw how, with Mexico, the Mexican president, Sheinbaum, she was brilliant. I mean, she agreed to put 15,000 Mexican troops on the border during Biden administration to help cut down on the border crossings, and it did during Biden's time. And so then Trump turns around and claims credit for it as part of the deal, And so he's going to make up a bunch of stuff, and China will give him these symbolic, meaningless things to point to. And he's saying, look what I got, this big win for you here. But basically, nothing has been achieved. Nothing could have been. I mean, this Smoot-Hawley thing happened in May, 95 years ago. I mean, just, it was in May 1925, 20, was May 1930. That was 95 years ago. And it caused a depression, and nothing's changed about the idea of tariffs. And he's back learning that lesson again. What the old saying about those who don't learn lessons of history do and repeat them. Here we are. And so they told him to go fly a kite, and so he's got the kite out right now, and he's trying to figure out some way to say this is a big win, art of the deal.
Well, here I found this little song just to play a little
Right.
taste of it. Okay, this took 90 seconds from beginning a concept to production. And
90 seconds.
On Thursday night, I fluffed his tie, sent Ricky off to sing Babaloo High. The crowd was swinging at the Copa floor, but ICE was creeping at our front door. They said, ma'am, we got some bad news for you. He had no wallet, no green card too. They come by Ricky, said he's a thug. Threw him in chains with a mega shrug. Inside the crowd went numb. Ricky's gone and Trump's gone dumb. No trial, no lawyer, just lies and things. Saying you must got gangs, throw him in. Corona, let it hit the press parade. Claim he wasn't the other gangster.
So anyway, just to give you a taste of that was all created by AI. I mean, and I can take and manipulate it. I've done other things with other songs where if I want to get it to sound like a Frank Sinatra band and make a birthday party for my granddaughter and highlight her life, you know, it'll produce this beautiful Frank Sinatra-esque and Michael Bublé sort-of-esque voice singing this great song to my granddaughter celebrating her gymnastics, straight A's, so forth and so on. It's an amazing, powerful tool. And if people don't realize that
What it's going to do in 5 years. I mean,
I'm sorry?
think what AI could do. Right now, the professors in every university are trying to figure out, you know, these briefs and these term papers and essays that submitted by almost all done by AI, and they're trying to figure out how they can tell. And it's getting increasingly impossible for a professor to determine whether the student's essay in front of him was written by the student or by AI.
Well, the funny thing about that is I have a brilliant son that uses AI and he's in marketing, and he said that he set up GPT as his good morning assistant, and he gave it a name, Star Wars name, and he just used it as a, good morning, how are you doing type of thing. And then all of a sudden ChatGPT gets the question, well, what do you want to work on today? And he says, well, I've got these 5 problems. And then ChatGPT came back and said, well, let me give you some ideas. So I decided, I'm going to use that, and I'm going to give my assistant my grandfather's name, called Pop-Pop. And so I call my AI assistant Pop-Pop, and I get up in the morning and said, hey, good morning, Pop-Pop, how you doing? And it'll respond back just like a human, just like you would to me. It'll sit and say, I'm doing great. I had a good night's sleep. I'm well rested. And, what are the things that you would want to do today? Are you going to look to play some golf, or, do you want to sit and work on lyrics? What are we going to work on? It'll just talk to me like a human being. Now, the interesting thing about, as I sit and learn it, is that I lost a response because I use it to correct my language and grammar and, just say the right things the way I want to say them. So I lost an email, or I wanted to review an email I sent to somebody, or a proposal, about 45 days ago. So 45 days ago. Okay. And I went in and I said, hey, Pop-Pop, do you remember we were working on this project for client ABC? Do you remember that email that we were working on that we were correcting? And it was instantaneous. Oh yeah, here it is. And do you want the rough draft or do you want the final draft? And I produced it, and it was right in front of me. But it keeps, I've gone into the spectrum of things that I work on with the different companies and the different ideas and the different people. I will sit and, Earth Day came up in the last 10 or so days. And it was a situation where I said, I would like to have this be a kickoff for our eco certification as we've always planned. And ChatGPT came back and said, well, would you like me to make you a nice poster that referenced, your media team and doing that? And I'm telling you, it was incredible,
Wow.
what it creates. Visually thinks it out, and then it'll sit and say, do you want any changes? Has this covered what you want? And if people don't understand that, people don't understand, they don't want to understand. People that are in my periphery are, going like, you're having too much fun with your friend in there. And I said, no, I get so much more done in a day, that I ever have, in research and such.
That's
So
what my friends who use AI said, that, they almost don't even want to reveal how helpful, how much of their own product they can help them. They can do, their productivity goes up exponentially. Lawyers now, you use it. You can see how it would just, write me a brief about this, and use
Right.
these pieces, and here's the parameter, and wham, there it is. It would take you, when I first started practicing law as this little tiny, this little 24-year-old, that looked like I was 16. I'd go to, when I had a case, I had to go to the law library, if you can imagine how primitive and backward that is. And I had to spend the weekend in the law library going up on the bookshelves and getting the cases and reading them and taking notes and putting together in a manual typewriter and then go and file it with the court. Now you could just and bam, it'd be there and it'd be 20 times as good in seconds. So this is a new world that we live in here. But back to our thing here, I think that this whole thing of intellectual diversity and viewpoint diversity, on the one hand, it is a good thing, and it's valued, just like this diversity thing was valuable, and it has shown itself to be valuable. And it is true that, faculty clubs tend to be monocultures of a lot of different values. And it might be helpful and stimulating and challenging if somebody came in and said, well, there's another point of view of this. What about this? And couldn't we equally argue this? And I've seen that in briefs, where somebody will come out of the woodwork and say, here's an argument, and you realize, wow, that's really a good point, And so, it's good in that context, and we need to keep an open mind to that. And it's a wholesome, healthy thing in that context. Of course, that's not the motive of the people that are bringing it forward. They're using the legislature to impose this and in this ham-fisted way, and that's not good. And so there's, the whole idea of academic freedom is threatened by this, and free speech is threatened by it, and the whole concept of the university. And you have this. It's a fascinating. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are bad. That's something that we all recognize as bad things. But is it the way to stop that to, deny people tenure or threaten them? Then you could use that in some other way. So, all these states are passing these laws ordering the trustees to dismiss people and fire people who are not promoting this thing. And what is that going to mean? Are they going to be hauled out of, these professors are now afraid to what they're going to talk about in class. If it gets controversial or it gets into a lot of the issues that are pertinent today, is somebody going to say, well, that's a liberal point of view, and why aren't you promoting the all your points of view are liberal points of view, and so I think maybe you should leave, and we should get somebody in here that's that believes that Trump is the greatest thing since sliced cheese. I am worried that where we've come so far with 10 states passing these things, and which are really just camouflage for wanting to promote a whole series of illiberal concepts. Basically, a lot of the Republican concepts about government are very illiberal concepts. They want to promote Christianity in the schools. They want to keep people being anti-American, which means teaching about history. They want to block any kind of racial critical race theory, which is just showing to people how generations of slavery, kidnapping people out of the jungles of Africa, dragging them here on boats, and then keeping them as slaves. That has a tendency to propagate itself, and the shortcomings, last generations. And we need to try to help those people assimilate. And that's not the same as so that's what critical race theory is supposed to do. It's supposed to help get these people into the mainstream so that they can have the same chance of being of the American dream as everybody else does. But I see that, this is going back into things you and I have talked about, that, today in the United States, because of the weakness of our educational system and how meritocracy has created this imbalance, it's virtually impossible for somebody at the bottom, a person born to parents in the bottom 20% economically in America has a lower chance of themselves rising into the top 20% as somebody born in England, which we always thought of as this stagnant, culture economically, and we were the land of opportunity. We're not anymore the land of opportunity, at least for the poorer people. Fixing that would greatly invigorate the United States. There's more studies that show that something called the realization rate, which is what is the chance of a person born at the bottom who's brilliant, he's poor parents, a poor single mom with two kids who works all the time, a kid born who's a genius. What is the chance of that kid being able to go to college and realize their potential? That's what the realization rate is. It 50%? Is it 80%? You know, in a culture that what we should strive for it to be 100%, that they would recognize these people and give them those opportunities and fund it and everything. But today, you know, if he doesn't have the parent that reads to him at night, he doesn't have getting the right preschool, you know, he doesn't do all this stuff, you know, and have these tutors and everything, he will never be able to compete with the top 20%. And will not be able to realize his potential. And so our realization rate in America is sinking. And our future depends on having, that was our magic before as America, you know, land of opportunity, is we had this high realization rate that doesn't matter who you were. And a generation or so ago, in our parents' generation, a lot of the CEOs of these big companies came up through the ranks. They didn't even have a college degree.
Right.
But they were recognized and able to go up. You would never find that today. You got to go to Stanford or Harvard to get into CEOs and most. So it's so disproportionate now, and the meritocracy and the ways that we've discussed in prior podcasts has become an exclusionary principle that basically gives the people who are born in the top 10% this huge advantage, insurmountable advantage over the people born in the bottom 20%. And so America is this gulf, and out of that gulf, and the realization by the bottom 2/3 that the people in the top 10%, the top 1% are taking all the money, all the huge increase in wealth of the United States has concentrated in this top thing, and they ain't getting any of it. And so this generated a resentment, perhaps justifiably so. And that resentment elected Trump, and it's going to end up trashing the whole thing, and we're going to bring down the whole house, burn the whole house down to fix that. And I think it needs to be recognized in lots of ways. And you know, the DEI thing is all part of the same problem that we're talking about here, and has some of the same solutions.
I think the problem is, we've got about 5 minutes to wrap up here, but a lot of people just, you know, the MAGA base doesn't really care. I mean, they to a certain extent, when it comes to what they're doing with immigration and all that, they think they're spot on. When it comes to you know, the tariffs and such, there are a little bit of movement, but not a lot. And the fear that, like I was talking to another one of my sons, I said, you know, in Germany, there was a night when they decided to burn all the books and you know, what was you'll know.
Crystal
I'm sorry?
Night. Crystal Night is what it's
Crystal
called.
Night. And if I'm remembering that wrong, but the point is that there were books in Germany that were not to be read or had to be pulled out, or, you know, obviously 6 some odd million people had to be, you know, just wiped off the face of the earth, you know, completely. But it's complete fascism. I mean, and you know, get rid of you know, the media. The media was bad, so he had to take over the media. Nothing different than what is going on in our world right now, and a lot of people are getting fearful of it. And now when they say, oh, they can go ahead and arrest Congress, or they can you know, anybody that, you know, the judges, you know, they'll come out and they'll say, well, if the judges aren't giving us the right verdicts, well, who cares? We're just going to do what we're going to do anyway. And when you have a president that says, who took an oath to protect the Constitution, and says on camera, I'm not exactly sure, you know, if that's in the Constitution, in an interview that he had pertaining to the ABC. And I'm pretty sure.
I don't know what the oath of office. I will faithfully execute the laws. You know.
Yeah.
And defend and protect the Constitution is all, and it's so fundamental. So it is a lot of scary stuff going on, and you know, it's not, you know, what gives me some hope is that a ever-growing percentage of the American people are turning against all this. And we didn't vote for that. We don't support that.
Right.
his approval ratings dropped down into, the low 40s, high 30s.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the pollsters said, like the New York Times guy, that, the law of presidential politics is that it only goes down from here. It's not going to go up.
Right.
And it's already lowest in 70 years, and he squandered this huge opportunity, and it's going to go on down. As it gets down into the 30s, the low 30s, then he says that you're going to see, the Republican establishment rebel, and they're going to do what rats do when they realize the ship is sinking. They're going to get off the ship.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch that happen if it does happen. But then, there are people who say that, as you were pointing out, that we don't need the Constitution, and it's there's a lot of very fascist, pre-Hitler talk around, and we don't have to have habeas corpus. We don't have to obey the judges. So the story is being told, and there's an optimistic outcome and a non-optimistic outcome, and it's
Well, Robert, on that note, we're going to go to the optimistic outcome, because I want to tell everybody right now that starting next week, I love Robert on these, and we appreciate all the feedback that we get pertaining to unwinding what's really true in Robert's show, sorting out truth. But we're going to bring Robert on our Golfers Golf and Travel show, because in the past, Robert has showed us that he loves to travel, and he's got mountain climbing behind him. I see every week beautiful pictures of he and his family and friends climbing and hiking and enjoying the outdoors, which is really what our Live Eco Style main company LLC is all about, enjoying all the good things in life. So we're going to really liven up our show next week on Golfers Golf and Travel, which thousands of people are now watching. We have distinguished golfers coming to that show, but the majority of it is going to be about travel, dining, eating, sipping, and enjoying life, and leaving a better footprint as we get into it. So Robert, I hope you're all on board for talking about your travel next week and having some fun.
I love that idea. I go, I've gone to 63 countries. I've been to every state, and I've climbed the highest 56 mountains, except for one. I go every few weeks. I've got 3 or 4 big peaks in the next couple of months, and I'd be happy to talk about the from a layman's point of view, what's fun about this stuff, and what's interesting about it. And
well, we're gonna pick not only his brain, we're gonna find out how his wife plans all these trips internationally, because he's got a big trip coming up in the fall, and how she does all her research. And Robert's going to bring that to us too. But I know we've done podcasts in the past where, in fact, the past week he actually fired up his wood burning fireplace in the middle of his tent with a chimney going out through the roof. Fascinating picture. I'm going to put that at the end on, here in the next couple of seconds, so people think I'm not crazy, but it's such a great concept to carry a wood burning fireplace.
There's a little tiny titanium thing.
Don't
fold up.
Anyway, for Robert Mills, his old Uncle Randy, and as we always say, is the way my grandfather said, and when we came in here, the beach was clean, and we always want to leave a better footprint as we leave. Thanks for enjoying today, Robert Mills, on things people believe that just ain't so. Robert sorted out a lot. But next week, we're going to have fun at Golfers Golf and Travel. And always go back to our liveecostyle.com, where these podcasts can be found right away in the upper left-hand corner of our front page, or go to our Roku channel, Excited Minds Media, or Live Eco Style. Easy to find, a lot of fun. You can go to YouTube. You can go to Live Eco Style on our Facebook page for Live Eco Style. Global Eco Traveling Facebook page. We're everywhere. So stay tuned next week. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to start traveling. We're going to start finding out how we can have a wood burning stove in our nylon tent and not burn it down. So for Robert Mills, this is old Uncle Randy. Robert, be safe. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, Randy. Enjoy that.
Bye-bye.